In preparation for this Yizkor hour, I came across a beautiful poem by Yehuda Amichai, of course, one of the national poets of Israel. He passed away several years ago now. It was published in 1976. It may be a poem that followed after the Yom Kippur War. It could be entirely separate, I'm not sure. But I wanted to share it with you this morning. Eneni yodea ma kara lach me'az, kashem she'eneni yodea ech kara li ma shekara li me'az, Yehuda Amichai wrote. I don't know what happened to you since then, just as I don't know how it happened to me since then. And then Yehuda Amichai concludes, Yizkor hu min hatikva. To remember is one kind of hope. Yizkor hu min tikva. To remember is one kind of hope. And I was wondering if you ever thought about it in this way, because I'm not sure that I ever framed it quite in that way. That memory, that remembering, is actually an act of hope. And especially when we take that act of remembering and couple it with faith, or couple it with the mitzvah, or couple it with a powerful act that brings remembering to another level of transformation. The Yizkor service as we have it now is actually based on an ancient midrash written some 2,000 years ago, a commentary on the book of Deuteronomy. And it was specific to the holiday of Yom Kippur and the idea of atonement. And for our rabbis, they wanted to know how they could continue to achieve atonement even beyond the grave. They wanted to know how they could continue to achieve atonement even beyond the grave. And so what they came to teach is that when we pledge tzedakah on Yom Kippur, not only do we begin our own act of tshuva, of repentance, but that when we pledge that tzedakah in memory of a loved one, that we elevate that loved one even higher among the rungs of heaven. That through that act of tzedakah, specifically tzedakah and typically to one's synagogue, that can actually continue the process of atonement even after one dies. And so with that idea in mind, our rabbis began conducting the Yizkor service as part of the Yom Kippur ritual. And it became powerfully linked, this idea that if we perform a mitzvah in memory of a loved one, then not only do we get credit, as it were, for that mitzvah, but that our loved one is elevated even higher among the rungs of heaven, that they get closer to God because of the mitzvahs that we perform in their name. We see that in our own time now, of course, because when someone dies and there's a shiva for them, when there's shiva, what do we do in the midst of shiva? Minyan, right? Minyan is a central part of shiva. Why? Because we're gathering to pray, not just because it's a mitzvah 3 times a day to pray, but because we're actually gathering in memory of that person. So they also get credit, as it were, for those prayers. Our mitzvah helps their atonement. So we come back now to this idea of Yizkor, which began at Yom Kippur. And then in the midst of the Crusades, our rabbis sought a way to create some sort of communal memory moment because of the suffering that existed during the Crusades. And so about 1,000 years ago, they actually added the Yizkor service to each of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And so now, as we know, Yizkor occurs 4 times throughout the year. And traditionally, within the language of the Yizkor prayers is actually that pledge once again. God, remember the person whom I'm remembering, and on account of my pledge to give tzedakah, allow that person to come even closer to your presence. Because of my act of tzedakah, allow that person who's no longer in this world and able to achieve atonement in this world, allow them to receive atonement. And so the traditional text of the Yizkor prayer actually has that specifically built in, that pledge of giving tzedakah, typically to one's synagogue. In the mid-20th century, and I'm not entirely sure why, though I think I can guess, they actually removed that idea of pledging tzedakah from the Yizkor prayers, and instead added a quotation from Psalm 16. And I'll invite you, if you want to take out your Yizkor booklets with me. I'm on page 7 in the Yizkor booklet. And our own booklet borrows from the mid-20th century that text. And you see the very last lines of the Hebrew, and it occurs in each of the Yizkor paragraphs. It says, Sova smachot et panecha ne'imot b'mincha netzach. And the actual translation, which comes from Psalm 16, Sova smachot et panecha, may my loved one fully rejoice in your presence, dear God. May the pleasantness of sitting at your right hand be eternal. That's literally what those words mean. Sova smachot et panecha ne'imot b'mincha netzach. And it comes from Psalm 16. And you see in our own text in our Yizkor service, it actually follows the tradition of the mid-20th century, which maybe says maybe we're not so sure about this idea that if we give tzedakah in memory of a loved one, they're elevated even higher. It's probably a little bit of ambivalence about this idea that we can affect what happens in the next world. But interestingly enough, in Siddur Sim Shalom, which is now a late 20th century, early 21st century publication, they've added it back in. And you're welcome, if you want, to turn with me in your blue Siddurim to page 192. And the Yizkor service that exists in our Siddur Sim Shalom, you see, combines what we had from the mid-20th century with the addition of Psalm 16 with the pledge. You see, it says, Hinani nodeb or nodevet tzedakah ba'ad haskarat nishmato. In loving testimony to this person's life, I pledge charity to help perpetuate ideals important to him or her. And then, of course, here it adds once again from Psalm 16, Sova smachot et panecha ne'imot b'mincha netzach. May my loved one know the fullness of joy that comes from sitting with you, God, forever. So now I want to invite us back to this idea of hope. What does the act of remembering have to do with hope? Is the very act of remembering root us in hope because we know that generations after us might remember us, and therefore we can be hopeful that perhaps we'll be remembered for a little while longer? Is the nature of our hope that what we do here can actually affect the lives, the spiritual lives, the souls of our loved ones who have gone to heaven, moving them even closer to God's presence and assuring them even more atonement in the next life? There's a sense of hope because we have a little bit of control to help our loved ones whom we're remembering today. Or is a sense of hope built into this idea of Sova smachot et panecha ne'imot b'mincha netzach? That when our time comes, may it not be till 120, we will rest comfortably in the eternal presence of the Lord. Just as our loved ones, Sova smachot et panecha, just as our loved ones, even right now, are finding the fullness of joy that comes from an eternity spent in the presence of our Creator. This hour of memory can also be an hour of hope. Yizkor hu min hatikva. To remember is an act of hope. Chag Sameach. I'll invite you now to turn with me in your Yizkor booklets to Psalm 23. We are on page 3. Page 3.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni v'maglei tzedek, Yancheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit el mavet, lo yirara, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דישנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
On page 4. You love cardinals, so they told me that's what you would be. That every time I saw one on a walk or at the feeder, that it would be you. And I would know that you're there and that you're doing okay. But I chose not to believe them. Not because I thought it was silly, but because there aren't enough cardinals in this world to help remind me that you're here, that you're doing okay. So I decided that I'd make it be any kind of bird. But that still wasn't enough, so I decided that since you also love flowers, you are flowers too. And you love the rain, so you're also the rain. And just so you know, you're also warm bread, and your hot coffee with just a little milk, and your naps in the hammock and the second glass of wine at Shabbat dinner. The list goes on, because so do you. You go on, like a cardinal, like the rain, like everything. We turn now to Psalm 16. We're on page 5.
Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini balemut, lachein samach libi ויגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לבטח. Amen.
Page 6. Out of the depths we called to you, and whether it was you or us or the both of us, we lived on and we built. Out of the depths we called to you, and we were strong and smart. We continued and we dreamt. Out of the depths we called to you, and with faith and hard work we kept going, and we found love, perhaps rediscovered it. Out of the depths we called to you, and with eyes gazing ever forward, we persevered, and we remember. Out of the depths we called to you, and this moment we thank you, however long this will last, as we continue to build, to dream, to love, to remember, to give thanks for what was and for what will be again. As we come now to the Yizkor meditations, I will invite you to rise. The Arona Kodesh is opened. You are welcome to use the Yizkor text found in our booklet, pages 7 through 11. that focuses from Psalm 16 on Sova Smachot et Panecha, on the idea of being close to the eternal and finding hope in that closeness. Or you're welcome to turn in your Seder Asim Shalom to page 192 and the subsequent pages if you want to participate in the custom of making a pledge in memory of your loved one. We continue now silently with the Yizkor meditations. Yizkor Elohim et nishmot kol achenu b'nei Yisrael shenitbechu b'shoah. May God remember the souls of all of our brethren, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes in the midst of the Shoah, the Holocaust of World War II. Yizkor Elohim et nishmot chayalei tzavah haganah liYisrael. May God remember the souls of our brothers and sisters in the state of Israel, who gave their lives for the sanctification of the name of God, the Jewish people, and the land of Israel. Yizkor Elohim nishmot krovai v're'ai shalchu la'olamam. Ana tiyena nafshoteam surot bitzroa chayim, utehi menuchatam kavod. Sova smachot et panecha ne'imot b'mincha netzach. May God remember the souls of all of our relatives and friends who've gone to their eternal home. In loving testimony to their lives, may we endeavor to perpetuate ideals important to them. Through such deeds and through prayer and memory are their souls bound up in the bond of life. May these moments of meditation strengthen the ties that link us to their memory. May they rest forever in dignity and peace, with fullness of joy, in the comfort of your eternal presence. And we say together, Amen. We turn now to page 15 for the memorial prayer.
אלמלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה ומעלות קדושים קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה שהלכו לעולמם בגן עדן בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם הנער בעל הרחמים הסתירם בסתר כנופך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם בשלום ונאמר
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the souls of our loved ones who've gone to their eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that they find perfect peace in your tender embrace. May their memories endure, inspiring truth and loyalty in our lives. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they forever rest in peace. And let us say together, Amen. On page 16, we offer the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba v'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ma'agala v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach leolam ulmei olmayim Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yithadar, v'yit'aleh, v'yithalal, shmei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata. Namiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. You may be seated. We continue page 100.